There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot touch. It is not the tiredness in your legs after a long day, nor is it the heaviness behind your eyes after too many hours staring at a screen. This kind of exhaustion lives somewhere much deeper. It lives in the part of you that has spent years absorbing, adjusting, and showing up for everyone around you, almost always at the direct expense of showing up for yourself. You know exactly what this feels like. You wake up already bracing before your feet even hit the floor. You reach for your phone, and your stomach tightens before the screen even unlocks because you already know what is waiting. Another request, another crisis, another person who needs a piece of the energy you are not sure you still have left to give. You walk into a room and within seconds, you scan the emotional temperature of every single person there. You sense who is angry, who is holding back tears, who is on the verge of an outburst. And before you have even taken your coat off, you have already adjusted your personality, your tone of voice, and your boundaries to make sure everyone else remains comfortable. And somewhere underneath all of that endless giving, all of that patience, and all of that holding space, there is a quiet voice asking a question you are almost afraid to sit with. How did I end up so empty? Today, we are going to answer that question. We are going to dismantle the lies society has told you about what it means to be a good person. We are going to dive into the deep, often uncomfortable psychology of Carl Jung to explore why you feel uniquely responsible for the emotional stability of other adults. And most importantly, we are going to show you how to break the invisible contract that has turned your empathy into a psychological prison. Act 1. The myth of the spiritual gift. Let us start by breaking a myth that the wellness industry loves to sell you. That deep, overwhelming urge you feel to help everyone around you, to absorb their pain, to fix their problems, to make sure everyone in the room is okay before you even think about yourself. That is not a spiritual gift. It is a wound. Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant psychologists who ever lived, spent decades exploring the deepest layers of the human mind. What he found about people who carry everyone else's burdens was both heartbreaking and profoundly hopeful. His conclusion was this: the person who feels everything, who cannot seem to say no matter how exhausted they are, is not specially gifted. That person is a child who never got permission to have their own needs. Think back to your childhood for a moment. And I mean really think back, not to the highlight reel, but to the actual daily emotional atmosphere of the house you grew up in. Was it predictable? Was it safe? Could you walk through the front door after school and have a reasonable idea of what mood you were going to walk into? For a massive percentage of people who identify as empaths, the answer is no. Maybe one of your parents struggled with unpredictable anger, or deep depression, or addiction. Maybe the emotional climate in your home shifted without warning, like weather you could never quite forecast. Maybe love felt entirely conditional, freely available when you were helpful and quiet, but completely withdrawn when you had needs or emotions of your own. Jung had a specific name for what children are forced to do in that kind of environment. He called it premature ego adaptation. Biologically and psychologically, a child's first job is to develop a sense of self, to figure out who they are, what they like, what they feel, and what they need. That is the fundamental work of childhood. But when a child's environment is emotionally chaotic or unpredictable, that essential inner work gets violently interrupted. The child simply cannot afford to focus inward because the real threat is outward. So the developing brain does something remarkable. It redirects all of its processing energy toward reading other people. The child learns to scan the room the second they walk in. They pick up on the subtle shift in a parent's voice. They notice the tension in a caregiver's shoulders before a single word is spoken. They become extraordinarily good at predicting how the people around them are feeling because their physical and emotional safety directly depends on it. This is not empathy in the way culture romanticizes it. This is a nervous system on high alert, permanently wired for threat detection. You learned that the safest way to survive an unpredictable environment was to become invisible or to become useful. You learned that love was only safe when the adults around you were calm. And here is the key insight Jung gave us. This survival wiring does not just disappear when you turn 18. You carry it with you. You carry it into your friendships, your romantic relationships, and your workplace. You walk into every room doing the exact same emotional calculation you learned to do as a terrified kid. Who needs something? Who is upset? How do I need to behave right now to keep the peace? It becomes completely automatic. It becomes invisible to you. And eventually, you mistake this trauma response for your personality. Act 2, the biology of the sponge, mirror neurons and fawning. To truly understand why you cannot simply let go of other people's emotions, we have to look at the hard biological reality of how your brain is currently operating. Every human brain contains mirror neurons, which are the cells responsible for allowing us to feel what others feel. They are the biological basis of compassion. But in people with high empathic sensitivity, the mirror neuron system is hyperactive and intensely responsive. When you are in the presence of another person's emotion, whether it is grief, anxiety, unspoken anger, or deep shame, your nervous system doesn't just observe it from a distance. It processes that emotion exactly the same way it would process your own. The line between what someone else is feeling and what you are feeling disappears entirely. You don't just perceive the tension, you absorb it. You walk through your entire day collecting other people's anxiety, irritability, and fear, and you carry all of it inside your own body. By the evening, you are exhausted and emotionally raw, and you have no idea why, because nothing dramatic even happened to you personally. When your nervous system absorbs this much distress, it triggers an ancient survival mechanism. You've heard of fight or flight, but there is another response that empaths default to almost exclusively: the fawn response. The fawn response is what happens when someone learns that the absolute safest way to manage conflict is to make the other person feel okay. Not to address the issue, not to hold your ground, not to walk away, but to soothe, to smooth things over, to bring the temperature down and restore the peace at any cost. Empaths are incredibly prone to the fawn response because fawning feels exactly like kindness. It feels like empathy. It feels like the mature, generous, highly evolved thing to do. You tell yourself you are just keeping the peace. You tell yourself you are just being the bigger person. But underneath that performance of virtue, something devastating is happening. You are teaching your own brain that your discomfort, your pain, and your boundaries are less important than maintaining another person's emotional equilibrium. You are training yourself over and over again to put yourself last. And you are training the people around you to expect a relationship where your well-being is never the priority. Act 3. The wounded healer and the trap of understanding. Why do you keep doing this? Why do you repeatedly step into the line of fire to manage other people's chaos? Jung studied what he called the wounded healer archetype. These are individuals who are magnetically drawn to those who are suffering, who feel most alive when they are desperately needed, and who organize their entire sense of identity around the act of helping others. And what Jung found over and over again was that this compulsion is almost never actually about the other person. It is about the helper. When your deepest sense of personal value is built on being needed, you will unconsciously seek out people who need you. When your identity is firmly rooted in being the strong one who holds everything together, you will inevitably surround yourself with people who are constantly falling apart. This dynamic is incredibly dangerous because of another core ability empaths possess: dimensional perception. Empaths don't just read actions, they read the hidden emotional architecture beneath the actions. You don't just feel someone's pain, you understand exactly where it came from. You can see the terrified child underneath the abusive adult. You can sense the deep, crushing insecurity beneath someone's arrogant exterior. You can detect the fear of abandonment underneath the person who always pushes you away. That depth of understanding is profound, but it creates a belief that becomes an inescapable trap. You start to believe, if I can understand why they are the way they are, if I can see the deep wound driving their cruelty, then maybe with enough patience, enough sacrifice, and enough unconditional love, I can be the person who finally heals them. That belief is not naivety, it is hope. But it is a very specific, parasitic kind of hope that makes leaving a toxic dynamic feel like a moral failure. How do you walk away from someone you understand so deeply? Here is the brutal truth that every empath must hear directly. Understanding someone's pain does not make them safe to be close to. Seeing exactly where someone's toxic behavior comes from does not reduce the actual impact of that behavior on your nervous system. Your depth of psychological insight is not a rescue contract. You did not agree, by virtue of possessing empathy, to become a rehabilitation center for broken adults. The shadow belongs to them, and they are the only ones who can do the work of facing it. No amount of your love, your patience, or your self-destruction will ever do that work for them. Act 4. Extroverted feeling and the false self. To fully break this cycle, we have to look at how you operate socially. Jung outlined different psychological types, and people who suffer from this hyper-responsibility often lead with a function called extroverted feeling. For the extroverted feeling type, being in harmony with the social environment feels like a matter of emotional survival. Your internal system is perfectly calibrated to pick up on what others feel, think, and expect from you. You enter a room and instantly adjust your posture, your opinions, and your energy to ensure you are accepted. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and start constantly asking, "What do they expect from me?" Over the years, to survive the pressure of always needing to be accepted, you construct a flawless persona. The persona is the social mask you wear for the world. You become the dependable one, the easygoing one, the friend who never complains, the partner who needs very little. You become a masterpiece of low-maintenance accommodation. But Jung issued a very clear warning. The moment you identify completely with your persona, the moment you believe that this agreeable, endlessly self-sacrificing mask is who you truly are, you begin a slow psychological suicide. When you live entirely through the persona, your authentic self doesn't simply disappear. It gets buried alive. You adapt so automatically to the demands of everyone around you that you lose all internal reference points. You no longer know what you genuinely feel, what you actually desire, or what your own limits are. And the cruelest part, on the outside, everything seems perfect. You receive compliments. You are viewed as reliable, sweet, and wonderfully diplomatic, but inside, a hollow, echoing void begins to expand. You feel like a ghost haunting your own life, performing a character on a stage where the play never ends, wondering why you feel completely dead inside, despite everyone telling you how good you are. Act 5. The shadow of healthy selfishness. So where does the real you go when you spend decades performing goodness? It goes into the shadow. Every human being has a shadow, the psychological basement where we lock away the parts of ourselves that our environment deemed unacceptable. For most people, the shadow contains traits like aggression, jealousy, or greed. But for empaths who grew up having to manage chaotic adults, the shadow contains something entirely different: healthy selfishness. The perfectly normal, biologically necessary kind of selfishness that says, "My needs matter, my feelings are real. I am allowed to take up space, I am allowed to say no without apologizing." You buried that part of yourself because very early on you learned a devastating lesson. Your needs created problems. When you were sad, it was an inconvenience to your parents. When you were angry, it was deemed too much. When you wanted something, it caused tension. So you did what any highly intelligent child does to survive. You amputated your own needs. You made yourself small, and you made yourself endlessly useful. You were not born without boundaries. You were explicitly trained that having boundaries made you unlovable. But the unconscious does not forget. The shadow does not simply dissolve because you ignore it. Every time you feel violated but force a smile, every time you feel legitimate rage but whisper, "It's fine," every time you betray your own boundaries to keep someone else comfortable, you are feeding the shadow. You are pushing vital, life-sustaining emotional energy into exile. And what you push down always gains autonomy. It begins to leak out as chronic exhaustion, as unexplained psychosomatic illness, as sudden, terrifying bouts of burnout, or as a deep, simmering resentment toward the very people you are sacrificing yourself for. Act 6. The predators who hunt the open door. When you build your entire personality around being agreeable, accommodating, and boundaryless, you are not just keeping the peace. You are sending a massive, glaring signal out into the world. That signal says, "I will not push back. I will absorb whatever you give me. You can treat me however you want, and I will still be here." Certain types of people, narcissists, emotional vampires, and chronic manipulators, have a finely tuned radar for this exact signal. They find it extraordinarily attractive. And they do not target you because you are weak. They target you because you are strong enough to carry their emotional garbage and conditioned enough to never complain about it. A narcissist needs an empathic supply, someone who will consistently prioritize another person's needs above their own, someone who will tolerate behavior that healthy individuals would instantly reject, Someone who will always find a generous reason to stay when every red flag is screaming to leave. And because you lack a rigid boundary system, you become what Jung called an unconscious container for their rejected emotions. The narcissist's secret shame, the emotional vampire's bottomless insecurity, the manipulator's self-loathing. All of it gets quietly transferred into your nervous system. You absorb it, metabolize it, and wonder why you feel like you are carrying 100 pounds of lead on your chest. When these individuals mistreat you, they know exactly how you will respond. They know that when conflict arises, you won't match their aggression, you won't hold the line, you will fawn, you will de-escalate, you will soften, and you will immediately ask what you might have done differently. To a manipulator, this is the ultimate tactical advantage. It tells them that conflict is a highly effective tool for resetting power. It teaches them that if they just make things uncomfortable enough, you will absorb more than your share of the blame just to restore harmony. They manage you with guilt. Guilt is the remote control for an empath's behavior. All a toxic person has to do is sigh loudly, play the victim, or say, "I just thought you cared about me," and you immediately fold. You cannot stand the idea of being the bad guy, so you collapse your own boundaries to prove your virtue. You are bleeding in the ocean, and you are surprised that the sharks keep circling. Act 7. The breaking point and the hollow moment. But this psychological arrangement cannot last forever. The human psyche is designed to seek wholeness, and eventually, the drive toward integration pushes back against your self-erasure. It doesn't happen with a dramatic explosion, it happens quietly. Jung called this the hollow moment. It is the moment you have just spent 3 hours on the phone regulating someone else's crisis. They hang up feeling instantly lighter, and you sit alone in your room, looking at the wall, feeling a specific bone-deep emptiness, and you realize, with terrifying clarity, that you cannot remember the last time anyone sat with you the way you just sat with them. You start to notice that the people you've been pouring your life into are not actually relating to you as a human being. They are relating to you as a resource. You are the emotional coffee machine, always on, always dispensing, never thanked, and expected to function flawlessly. This realization induces profound cognitive dissonance. The story that sustained you, "I am just a good, selfless, caring person," collapses. You realize that the relationship was only functioning because you were carrying it single-handedly. You realize that your compulsive generosity wasn't truly about love. It was a desperate, highly sophisticated survival strategy designed to ensure you were never abandoned. When this illusion breaks, the empath enters an exhausting period of withdrawal. You stop answering texts immediately. You start saying no. You decline invitations, and the people around you panic. They don't panic because they miss your authentic self. They panic because the emotional infrastructure they depended on is shutting down. They will accuse you of changing. They will say you've become cold, selfish, or difficult. They will try to guilt-trip you back into your old, compliant role. Jung had a term for this: relational recalibration. It is incredibly painful. Some relationships will simply not survive it because they were never built on mutual love. They were built on your utility. The people who threatened to leave because you finally set a boundary were never genuinely there to begin with. Act 8. Emotional sovereignty and sacred selfishness. To survive this fallout and reclaim your life, you must undergo a complete psychological rewiring. Jung pointed to several specific developmental skills that empaths must deliberately build. The first is what Jung called emotional sovereignty. This is the absolute, non-negotiable recognition that you are not responsible for how other adult human beings feel. You did not cause their emotions, you cannot permanently fix their emotions, and it is explicitly not your job to prevent them from experiencing discomfort. When you constantly intervene to manage another adult's emotional state, you are not actually helping them. You are stunting them. You are preventing them from developing their own internal emotional resources. True love requires allowing people the dignity of their own experience, including the painful parts. The second concept is sacred selfishness. When empaths hear the word selfish, they cringe. You have been taught that prioritizing yourself is a moral failure. Jung rejected this completely. He argued that a healthy human being must have a strong ego, a stable, clearly defined sense of where you end and someone else begins. Without that boundary, you do not have connection, you have enmeshment. You lose yourself inside other people's emotional chaos, and mistakenly call it love. Sacred selfishness means taking your own psychological health and your own boundaries exactly as seriously as you take everyone else's. It means developing need legitimacy, the radical belief that your needs are exactly as valid as anyone else's in the room. Equal, not less than. Equal, you are allowed to be exhausted. You are allowed to not want to talk. You are allowed to walk away from a draining conversation without writing a 3-paragraph apology explaining why. You are allowed to want things for yourself without having to earn that right by first fixing everyone else's life. Acts 9. The power of conscious return and the pause. Understanding this intellectually isn't enough. You need the mechanics to stop your nervous system from reacting on autopilot when you feel the overwhelming urge to absorb someone else's crisis, or when someone hits you with a manipulative guilt trip. You must deploy the most powerful tool in the empath's arsenal, the pause. Do not respond immediately. The version of you that exists in the first 30 seconds after being triggered is operating purely from trauma and survival reflex. That version will fawn, apologize, and surrender. The pause is not submission, it is strategy. It is the exact moment you snatch the emotional steering wheel back from the manipulator. During that pause, you practice what Jung called conscious return. Empaths will always feel other people's energy. That neurological sensitivity never goes away, but you must develop an observing ego. When you sense someone's anger or grief, you acknowledge it, but you visualize that energy returning to them and your energy returning to you. You tell yourself quietly, that is theirs, this is mine. You stop treating your empathic abilities as a rescue mandate, and you start using them as a navigation system. You perceive someone's shadow, but instead of trying to heal it, you use that information to decide exactly how far away from them you need to stand. Acts 10. Becoming the sovereign empath. As you stop bleeding for people who aren't wounded, as you stop shrinking yourself to make toxic people feel tall, your entire frequency changes. You transition from being an exhausted and integrated sponge into what we might call a sovereign empath. You do not become cold. You do not become a callous, unfeeling robot. In fact, Jung noted that empaths who do the heavy work of integration become more precisely loving. They become balanced warriors, capable of extraordinary gentleness with the people who have earned it, and capable of cold, unambiguous, impenetrable boundaries against the people who have not. You stop giving from a place of desperate scarcity and start giving from a place of overflow. When your cup is full, your generosity is genuine. There is no hidden resentment, no unspoken contract, no part of you keeping score. When a manipulator tries to throw a guilt trip at you, it bounces off. You have developed guilt immunity. You recognize that their theatrical display of disappointment is not evidence that you did something wrong. It is merely their frustration that they can no longer use you. You look at them with calm, unbothered eyes, and you let their manipulation hang in the silent air, completely powerless. You are no longer terrified of conflict because you know that a world full of empaths who burn themselves to the ground managing everyone else's reality is not a compassionate world. It is a world full of depleted, hollow people who cannot show up for themselves. Your sensitivity was never the problem. The problem was being placed in environments that demanded you betray yourself in order to belong. The problem was being taught that your profound capacity to feel was a mandate to carry the emotional weight of everyone who refused to carry their own. You are not broken. You were responding perfectly to a completely unreasonable demand. The exhaustion you feel is just the psychic death of the false self that survived by being endlessly useful. Let it die. What comes next is the birth of the real you, a self that does not need to absorb the tension of the room to prove its right to exist. A self that can feel the tragedy of the world, hold space for the people who truly matter, and still go to sleep at night in perfect, unbroken peace. Stop abandoning yourself. Stop managing the room. Stop carrying what was never yours. The moment you become sovereign over your own energy, you become untouchable. Your abilities were never meant to drain you. They were meant to guide you. It is time to let them.